The year ended on a morning when the twin suns rose in perfect alignment, casting double shadows across the crystal gardens of the palace. Jinho stood among the plants he had come to love, watching the light play across leaves and petals from a dozen different worlds. He had changed so much since that first terrified day in the throne room. His body had adapted to the stringed rhythms of Volanthi life. His tongue had learned to form sounds that human mouths were never meant to make, and his heart had found a home in a place he had never expected. The Queen had summoned him for what would be their final audience of the trial marriage in a few hours. The agreement they had made would officially expire, and Jinho would be free to return to Earth free. It was a strange word, one that should have filled him with relief. Instead, as he walked through the crystalline corridors toward the throne room, he felt something closer to sadness. So much had happened in this year. He had survived assassination attempts and political intrigue, made friends among beings who should have been his enemies, and discovered that the universe was far stranger and more wonderful than he had ever imagined. The throne room was empty when he arrived, the vast space silent except for the soft hum of the crystal walls resonating with the morning light. The Queen was not on her throne. Instead, she stood in the center of the chamber, waiting for him. She was dressed simply by Volanthi standards, without the elaborate ceremonial decoration she usually wore, and for the first time, Jinho thought she looked almost vulnerable. "The year has passed," she said as he approached. "You have fulfilled your obligation." "I have," Jinho agreed. "The trade agreements have been finalized. Your people will have their mining rights, and the alliance between our civilizations is secure." The Queen continued. "By every measure, this arrangement has been a success. By every measure," Jinho repeated. They stood facing each other in the center of that vast empty room, and for a long moment, neither spoke. "I have prepared a ship to take you home," the Queen said finally. "It waits in the diplomatic hangar. My personal pilot will ensure you reach Earth safely." "That is very generous, Your Majesty. It is the least I can do," she replied. "You came here expecting to negotiate a trade deal, and instead you were forced into a marriage you never wanted. You handled the situation with more grace than anyone could have expected." Jinho nodded slowly, but his feet did not move toward the door. "You are free to go," the Queen said, and there was something in her voice that sounded almost like a question. "I know. Your family is waiting for you. Your career, your life. I know." Still, he did not move. The Queen tilted her head in that curious gesture he had learned to recognize over the past year. "Is there something else?" "Consort?" Jinho reached into the pouch at his side and pulled out a small object that caught the light. It was a crystal, about the size of his fist, with patterns swirling inside it like frozen storms. He had spent the last 3 months growing it, using techniques that Tharakel had taught him. It was imperfect, as any human attempt at Volanthi craftsmanship would be, but he had poured everything he had into its creation, and at its heart, suspended forever in the crystalline matrix, was a single golden drop of honey. "What is this?" the Queen asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "A gift," Jinho said, "from me to you." He knelt, just as he had knelt a year ago, when he had first offered honey to an alien queen without understanding what it meant. "I know what it means now," he said, looking up at her. "I know the weight of this tradition, the commitment it represents." The Queen stared at him, her compound eyes reflecting his image 100 times. "You would stay?" she asked, willingly. "Not because of politics or duty, but because you choose to?" "I have thought about this every day for the past month," Jinho admitted. "I have listed all the reasons why I should go home, and there are many: my family, my career, the simple comfort of being among my own kind." He paused, gathering his courage. "But then I think about what I would be leaving behind. This palace, these gardens, Thirakel and the other consorts who have become my friends. And most of all, I think about you." He held the crystal up higher, You told me once that no one had offered you honesty in centuries, that everyone around you calculates every word and gesture. I cannot promise that I will always understand your culture, or that I will never make mistakes. But I can promise you this: I will always be honest with you. The queen was silent for so long that Jinho began to fear he had made a terrible mistake. Then she reached down and took the crystal from his hands, turning it slowly to watch the honey glimmer in the light. I have lived for over 300 years, she said. I have seen empires rise and fall. I have made decisions that shaped the fate of billions, but I do not think I have ever been as exposed. Surprised as I was the day you walked into my throne room with a jar of honey and accidentally proposed marriage. She made that clicking laugh he had come to love, and now, 1 year later, you do it again, but this time on purpose. Is that a yes? Jinho asked hopefully. You humans, she said, and there was warmth in her voice that he had never heard before. You stumble into everything, and somehow you make it work. She held out her hand, and Jinho took it. Her grip was strange, harder and cooler than a human hand, but it felt like home. Welcome to the queendom, Park Jinho, she said. Not as a diplomatic accident, not as a political tool, but as my chosen consort. Jinho rose to his feet, still holding her hand. Thank you, Your Majesty. Sarath Ivan, she corrected. When we are alone, you may call me by my name. It was an honor he knew had not been granted to anyone in living memory. Thank you, Sarath Ivan. News of his decision spread quickly, and reactions were mixed on both sides. Some humans called him a traitor. Others called him a hero of diplomacy. Some Volantes still resented his presence, while others had come to respect him. But in the years that followed, the Volante-human alliance grew into one of the strongest partnerships in galactic history. Scholars would write papers about it, crediting careful planning, cultural sensitivity programs, and strategic negotiation. They would analyze trade agreements and diplomatic protocols, searching for the secret to its success. Jinho would read these studies sometimes, sitting in the crystalline gardens with Sarath Ivan beside him. And he would smile. The scholars were not wrong, exactly, but they were missing the most important part. The alliance had not been built on strategy or calculation. It had been built on a jar of honey, a year of stubborn adaptation, and the simple human belief that even the most impossible situations could become something beautiful if you refused to give up. What are you thinking about? Sarath Ivan asked one evening as they watched the twin suns set. I am thinking about how lucky I am. Jinho replied. She made her clicking laugh, the sound that had once confused him and now felt like music. Lucky? You accidentally proposed to an alien queen, survived an assassination attempt, and gave up your entire world to live among beings who cannot even eat the same food as you. I know, Jinho said, taking her hand in his. Like I said, lucky. And somewhere in the vast archives of the Volante Queendom, carefully preserved for future generations, sat a small crystal with a drop of honey at its heart, a reminder that sometimes the greatest alliances begin with the smallest accidents, and that humans, for all their fragility and foolishness, had a gift for turning stumbles into something extraordinary. The queen's rage was a terrible thing to witness when she learned of the assassination attempt. She summoned the entire court to the throne room and demanded answers with a fury that made the crystal walls themselves seem to vibrate. Jinho had never seen her like this. Her calm composure completely gone, replaced by something ancient and dangerous. Someone in my court tried to murder my consort, she declared, her voice echoing through the chamber. This is not just an attack on a human. This is an attack on me, on my authority, on the laws that have governed our people for millennia. The assembled courtiers trembled before her, none daring to meet her eyes. The servant who had carried the poisoned meal had already confessed, revealing that he had been paid handsomely by someone he refused to name. But he did not need to name anyone. The evidence trail led directly to High Advisor Vethmer Volante investigators, found records of secret payments, intercepted communications discussing the human problem, and witnesses who had seen the advisor meeting with known opponents of the trial marriage when the guards came for him. Vethmer did not resist. He stood before the queen with his head held high, showing no remorse. "I did what was necessary to protect our people," he declared. "This human has no place in our court. His presence weakens us, makes us look foolish before the other empires." "That was not your decision to make," the queen replied, her voice cold as ice. "Someone had to make it." Vethmer shot back. "You have been blinded by your curiosity, by your loneliness. But I see clearly. Humans are parasites who will take everything we have and give nothing in return." The queen rose from her throne, descending the steps until she stood directly before the advisor, who had served her for over 200 years. "The penalty for attempting to murder a royal consort is death," she said. "You know this." "I do," Vethmer replied. "And I accept my fate, but know this, Your Majesty. There are others who share my views. Killing me will not change that." The queen raised her hand, ready to pronounce sentence. "Wait." The word came from Jinho, and it surprised him almost as much as it surprised everyone else in the chamber. The queen turned to look at him, her expression unreadable. "You wish to speak, consort?" Jinho stepped forward, aware that every eye in the room was now fixed on him. His legs felt weak, and his heart was pounding so hard he was sure everyone could hear it. But he had to say something. He had to try. "Your Majesty, I request that you spare his life." The court erupted in whispers and clicks of disbelief. Even Vethmer looked stunned, his composure finally cracking. "He tried to kill you," the queen said. "And you ask for mercy?" "I do," Jinho confirmed. "Not forgiveness. I am not asking you to forgive what he did. But execution will only create a martyr. There are others who share his views. He said so himself. If you kill him, he becomes a symbol, a hero to those who oppose change." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "But if you exile him instead? If you show that the crown can be both strong and merciful, you take away that power. He lives, but he lives in disgrace, stripped of his title and his influence, forced to watch as the things he tried to prevent come to pass anyway." The queen stared at him for a long moment around them. The court was absolutely silent, waiting. "You are asking me to show mercy to someone who would have watched you die without a second thought," she said. "Yes," Jinho replied simply. "Why?" It was a genuine question, and Jinho could see that the answer mattered to her. "Because mercy is what separates justice from revenge," he said. "And because I want to believe that people can change. Maybe he never will. Maybe he will hate me until the day he dies. But at least he will have the chance to reconsider." Vethmer made a harsh, bitter sound. "I do not want your mercy, human. I would rather die than owe my life to you." "That is not your choice to make," Jinho replied calmly. "Just as you decided my fate without my consent, now I am deciding yours. The difference is that I am choosing to let you live." The queen was silent for what felt like an eternity. Then she began to laugh. It was not the warm, amused laugh Jinho had heard before, but something deeper, older, filled with emotions he could not name. 300 years, she said, still laughing softly. 300 years I have ruled, and I thought I understood power. I thought I knew all its forms. She turned to address the court, her voice carrying to every corner of the chamber. Mercy is not weakness. It is a choice that only the strong can make. My consort has reminded me of this truth today. She looked at Vethmer with something that might have been pity. High Advisor Vethmer, you are stripped of your title, your lands, and your position. You will be exiled to the outer colonies, never to return to the throne world. You will live, but you will live knowing that a human you despised showed you more grace than you ever showed him. Vethmer said nothing. But the defeat in his posture spoke louder than words. The guards led him away, and the court slowly began to disperse. Everyone processing what they had just witnessed, Terako approached Jinho with something like awe in her eyes. I have never seen anyone speak to the queen like that. I have never seen anyone ask for mercy for their own would-be killer. I hope I did the right thing, Jinho said quietly. You did something unprecedented, Terako replied. Whether it was right or not, only time will tell. Later that evening, the queen summoned Jinho to her private chamber. She was standing by the window, looking out at the twin suns setting over the crystal spires of her palace. I have ruled for a very long time, she said without turning around. I have made countless decisions, sent soldiers to war, negotiated treaties, built and destroyed alliances. But today you surprise me again. Jinho remained silent. Waiting mercy is not a concept that comes naturally to my people, she continued. We are logical, efficient, practical. When someone threatens us, we eliminate the threat. It is simple. She finally turned to face him. But watching you today, I realize something. Your species is fragile. You cannot regenerate limbs. You have short lifespans. You need constant food and water and sleep by every measure. You should not have survived to reach the stars. And yet here we are, Jinho said. And yet here you are, the queen agreed. And now I think I understand how. It is not because you are strong. It is because you are stubborn. You refuse to accept the obvious answers. You insist on finding another way. She moved closer to him, close enough that he could see his reflection in her compound eyes. You could have demanded his death. No one would have blamed you. But instead you chose to let him live, not because you are weak, but because you believe that mercy itself has power. Do you think I was wrong? Jinho asked. The queen considered the question carefully. I think you were human, she said finally. And perhaps that is not such a bad thing to be. Word of what had happened spread through the queendom faster than light could travel. The human consort who had asked for mercy for his would-be assassin, some called him weak, a fool who did not understand the ways of power. But others saw something different. They saw a being from a fragile species who had shown strength of a kind they had never considered. A strength that did not rely on force or fear, but on something harder to define. And slowly, quietly, opinions began to change. By the time the year was nearly over, Jinho was no longer just a diplomatic accident. He had become something new, something the galaxy had never seen before, a bridge between worlds, built not on treaties or trade agreements, but on the simple, stubborn human belief that things could always be better than they were. The first month nearly destroyed him. Jinho had thought he was prepared for life in an alien court. But thinking and living were very different things. The Volanti did not sleep the way humans did, taking only brief rest periods scattered throughout their 30-hour day cycle. This meant that court activities could begin at any moment, and Jinho was expected to be present for all of them. He learned to survive on fragments of sleep stolen between ceremonies and meetings, his body slowly adapting to a rhythm it was never designed for. The food was another challenge. Volanti cuisine was based on minerals and processed plant matter that human stomachs could barely digest for the first 2 weeks. Jinho lived almost entirely on the emergency rations he had brought from Earth, carefully rationing each meal while the palace cooks tried to create something he could actually eat. They succeeded eventually, producing a bland paste that tasted like nothing but at least kept him alive. The other consorts were perhaps the hardest part. Queen Sarath Ivan maintained a small hive of bonded partners, 6 Volanti of various ages and backgrounds who had been chosen over her long reign for their wisdom, beauty, or political value. They viewed Jinho with open hostility. You do not belong here, a consort named Kethril told him during his first week. blocking his path in one of the crystal corridors. "You are a political accident, nothing more, and when the year ends, you will be gone and forgotten." "Perhaps," Jinho replied, too tired to argue, "but until then, I am here, and I intend to learn what I can." He walked around Kethril and continued on his way, feeling the consort's angry gaze burning into his back, but not all of them were hostile. Thurikel was the youngest of the consorts, bonded to the Queen only 50 years ago, which was practically childhood by Volanti standards. She watched Jinho with curiosity rather than contempt, and one evening she approached him as he sat alone in a garden, struggling to memorize Volanti vocabulary. "Your pronunciation is terrible," she said, settling onto a bench across from him. "I know," Jinho admitted with a tired smile. "Human throats were not designed for your language." "No, but you keep trying anyway," Tyrakel observed. "Why?" "The translators work well enough." Jinho thought about the question before answering. "Because I want to understand. Not just the words, but the meaning behind them. Translators give you the surface of things, but to really know a culture, you have to speak its language." Thurikel made a soft clicking sound that Jinho had learned to recognize as thoughtful consideration. "You are strange for a human," she said finally. "The others who came before you, the diplomats and traders, they never tried to learn. They just wanted to take what they needed and leave. Maybe that is why they all failed," Jinho suggested. From that evening on, Thurikel began teaching him. She corrected his pronunciation, explained the subtle meanings that translators missed, and slowly introduced him to aspects of Volanti culture that no human had ever been allowed to see. In return, Jinho told her about Earth, about oceans and forests, and the strange soft creatures called humans who had somehow stumbled their way into the stars. "You really cannot regrow limbs?" Thurikel asked one day, her voice filled with disbelief. "We really cannot," Jinho confirmed. "If we lose an arm or a leg, it is gone forever. We can replace it with machines, but the original is lost. That is terrifying," she said. "How do you survive being so fragile?" Jinho smiled. "We are very careful, and when being careful fails, we are very stubborn." The Queen watched all of this from a distance. Jinho rarely had private audiences with her after that first night, as her duties kept her occupied with the endless business of running an empire. But sometimes he would look up during a court ceremony and find her eyes already on him, watching him with that same curious expression she had worn in the throne room. He did not know what she was looking for, but he hoped he was not disappointing her ambassador Quan, now recovered from her illness. Contacted him weekly through secure channels. "Earth's government is still furious with you," she told him during one of their calls. "They are calling this an unauthorized diplomatic incident. What would they have preferred?" Jinho asked. "War? They would have preferred someone else making this decision," Quan replied. But there was something like respect in her voice. "Still, the preliminary reports are positive. The Volanti Trade Council has begun discussing terms that they rejected from every previous delegation." "The Queen's influence," Jinho said. "Your influence," Quan corrected. "The court sees you learning their language, respecting their customs, and treating their culture as worthy of study. It is changing how they view humanity." Jinho had not thought of it that way. He had been so focused on surviving each day that he had not realized he might actually be accomplishing something. 3 months into his trial marriage, Jinho attended a ceremony celebrating the anniversary of the Queen's ascension to the throne. It was the grandest event he had witnessed since his arrival, with representatives from all 17 systems gathering to pay tribute to their ruler. He stood with the other consorts, wearing robes of Volanti design that Thurikel had helped him choose. Kethril still glared at him, but some of the others had begun to soften their hostility. High Advisor Vethmer was also present. standing near the front of the assembly with the other senior officials. He had not spoken to Jinho since that first day, but his disapproval was a constant presence. Like a shadow that followed Jinho wherever he went, the ceremony lasted for hours, filled with speeches and rituals and offerings from across the empire. When it finally ended, Jinho was exhausted and hungry. Grateful that the palace cooks had learned to prepare something resembling human food, he made his way to his chambers through the winding, crystal corridors. His mind already focused on rest, he did not notice the figure waiting in the shadows until it was almost too late. "Human," a voice called out, and Jinho turned to see a servant he did not recognize holding a covered tray. "The kitchen has prepared a special meal to celebrate the ceremony. The queen requested it be delivered to you personally." Jinho was suspicious immediately. In 3 months, the queen had never sent him personal gifts through servants, and something about this situation felt wrong, but he was tired and hungry. And perhaps he was being paranoid. He reached for the tray. "Wait," another voice called out, and Therakel appeared at the end of the corridor. Moving quickly toward them, "Jinho, do not." She stopped suddenly, her antennae twitching as she drew closer to the tray. "That smell," she said, her voice turning sharp with alarm. "That is not food." She lunged forward and knocked the tray from the servant's hands. It clattered to the floor, and the cover fell away to reveal a dish that looked like any other. The Lanthi meal, but now Jinho could see that the sauce had a strange shimmer to it. "Almost metallic poison," Tyracle said, her voice cold with fury. "Someone has tried to poison you." The servant turned to flee, but Velanthi guards were already appearing at both ends of the corridor, alerted by the commotion within moments. He was restrained and dragged away for questioning. Jinho stood frozen, staring at the spilled food that had almost killed him. "Are you all right?" Tyracle asked, placing a gentle hand on his arm. Yes, I think so," he managed. "How did you know?" "I did not know for certain," she admitted, "but I saw Vethmer speaking with that servant earlier, and something about their conversation seemed wrong, so I followed Vethmer." The High Advisor who had made no secret of his hatred for humans. Jinho looked down at the poisoned meal and realized that his year in the Volanthi court had just become much more dangerous than he had imagined. The hours that followed were the longest of Jinho's life. He stood in that sealed throne room while diplomats and advisors argued around him in languages he could barely understand, their voices rising and falling like waves crashing against rocks. Ambassador Quan worked frantically from her medical bed, contacting every expert on Volanthi culture that humanity had access to, searching for some loophole or exception that might save them from this disaster. There was none. The tradition was ancient and absolute, written into Volanthi law at the deepest level. When someone offered concentrated sweetness to a queen, it was a proposal of union, and the queen had only 2 choices: accept or refuse. If she refused, it was considered an insult so grave that war was the only acceptable response. If she accepted, the one who made the offer became her consort, bound to her court for life. "This is impossible," Jinho muttered to himself as he paced the small area the guards had allowed him. "There has to be another way." High Advisor Vethmer, a tall Volanthi with a shell so dark it was almost black, approached him with clear disgust in his movements. "There is no other way." "Human," he said, his translator giving his words a cold and harsh quality. "You have stumbled into our most sacred tradition with your ignorance, and now you must face the consequences." "I did not know," Jinho said for what felt like the 100th time. "Your ignorance does not change reality," Vethmer replied. "The queen must decide, and whatever she decides will shape the future of both our peoples." He turned and walked away, leaving Jinho alone with his thoughts as the arguments continued around him. Jinho found himself watching the queen. She sat on her throne in silence, Observing everything but participating in nothing, her advisors shouted and debated, some demanding she refuse the proposal and prepare for war, others urging her to accept and use the human as a political tool, but she said nothing, her compound eyes moving slowly across the chamber as if searching for something. And sometimes, Jinho noticed, those eyes settled on him, not with anger or contempt, but with something that looked almost like curiosity. He thought about what he knew of her, which was not much beyond what any human diplomat would study. She had ruled for over 300 years. The longest reign in Volanti history, she had united warring factions, expanded her empire, and built her people into one of the most powerful forces in the galaxy. But she had also been alone at the top of that power for all those centuries. Surrounded by subjects and advisors, but never by equals, Jinho made a decision that was either very brave or very stupid. Probably both. I request a private audience with the Queen, he announced loudly. Cutting through the noise of the arguing advisors, silence fell over the chamber. Like a heavy blanket, Vethmer turned to stare at him with what was clearly outrage. You dare to make demands, human? You who have caused this crisis with your foolishness. I am not making a demand, Jinho replied, keeping his voice calm even though his heart was racing. I am making a request, as is my right under Volanti hospitality law. He had spent those long hours not just worrying, but also remembering everything he had studied about Volanti customs. Hospitality law required that any guest in a Volanti court could request a private audience with their host once, and it could not be refused. The advisors turned to look at the Queen, waiting for her response for a long moment. She was still as stone. Then she rose from her throne, and the court fell silent. The human speaks correctly, she said. He has the right to request, and I have the duty to grant. Clear the chamber. Your Majesty, Vethmer began to protest. I said clear the chamber, the Queen repeated, and her voice carried the weight of 3 centuries of absolute authority. The advisors and courtiers filed out through a side door, their reluctance clear in every step. Even the guards departed, leaving only the Queen and the human alone in that vast crystalline space. When the last footsteps had faded, the Queen descended from her throne and approached Jinho up close. She was even more impressive, towering over him by at least 2 feet, a shell gleaming with patterns that seemed to shift in the light. You are either very clever or very foolish, she said. I have not yet decided which. I have been asking myself the same question. Your Majesty, Jinho admitted to his surprise. She made that clicking laugh again. Softer this time, almost gentle. Come, she said, gesturing toward a door hidden behind her throne. Let us speak in a place where walls do not have ears. She led him through corridors of crystal into a private chamber that was smaller and more personal than anything he had seen in the palace. Plants from a dozen different worlds grew in careful arrangements, and soft light filtered through walls that were more translucent than transparent. This is where I come when I need to think, the Queen said, settling onto a low platform that seemed designed for rest. Sit, human, and tell me what you wish to say. Jinho found a place to sit across from her and gathered his courage. I wanted to ask you a question. Your Majesty, ask. Why did you laugh when I offered the honey? You could have been angry. You could have had me killed on the spot. But you laughed. Why? The Queen was silent for a long moment, her eyes reflecting the soft light of the chamber. Because it has been a very long time since anyone surprised me, she finally said. 300 years of rule, of politics, of everyone around me calculating every word and gesture. And then a young human walks into my throne room and accidentally proposes marriage. She made a sound that might have been a sigh. It was genuine. She continued. Foolish and ignorant, yes, but genuine. You truly wanted to show respect for my culture. You truly thought you were doing something good. Do you know how rare that is in my world? Jinho did not know how to respond, so he simply listened. My advisors offer me flattery designed to advance their positions. My enemies offer me threats designed to test my weakness. But no one offers me honesty, the queen said. Your gift was honest. Even if it was also catastrophically uninformed. I am sorry for the trouble I have caused, Jinho said. Are you? I wonder, the queen replied. You came here to negotiate a trade agreement. And instead you have created a situation that could reshape the relationship between our peoples. Some might call that an opportunity. Jinho felt something shift in the conversation. A door opening that he had not expected. Your Majesty, he said carefully. What if there was a way to turn the situation into something that benefits both of us? Not war, not permanent binding, but something new? The queen leaned forward, her interest clear. I am listening, human. What if we created a trial period? 1 year. I stay here as your consort, learning your ways and representing humanity in your court. At the end of that year, if either of us is dissatisfied, the union ends with no dishonor, but if it works, the queen prompted. Then humanity gains not just mining rights, but a true alliance with the Volanti Queendom. And you gain. He hesitated, unsure if he should say what he was thinking. Go on, the queen said. And you gain someone who will be honest with you, Jinho finished. Someone who has no political agenda, no faction to serve. No centuries of history weighing down every word. Just a human who stumbled into your court and somehow has to make the best of it. The queen stared at him for a long time. Then she began to laugh again. That strange clicking sound that echoed through the crystal chamber. You humans, she said, you stumble into everything. And somehow you make it work. She rose from her platform and looked down at him with those ancient, knowing eyes. I accept your proposal, Park Jinho of Earth, 1 year. And then we shall see what we shall see. Jinho released a breath he had not realized he was holding. Thank you. Your Majesty. Do not thank me yet, she replied. And there was something like warmth in her voice. The real challenge begins tomorrow. Park Jinho had never expected to stand in the throne room of an alien queen. But life had a strange way of pushing people into places they did not belong. The crystalline walls of the Volanti Palace rose around him like frozen waterfalls, catching the pale blue light of the twin suns and scattering it into 1,000 rainbow fragments across the floor. He was 26 years old, barely experienced enough to handle trade meetings on Earth. And now he stood before one of the most powerful rulers in the known galaxy. This was not supposed to be his mission. Ambassador Quan Mai Rei was supposed to be here. Not him, but she had fallen ill 3 days before the scheduled meeting. And there was no time to send another senior diplomat. You know the basics. She had told him through the holofeed from her medical bed. Her face pale and tired. Just smile, be polite, and do not agree to anything without consulting me first. Jinho had nodded and promised to be careful now. Standing in the vast throne room with hundreds of Volanti courtiers watching him with their multifaceted eyes, he wondered if careful would be enough. The Volanti were insectoid beings, tall and elegant in their own alien way, with hard shells that gleamed like polished armor and delicate wings folded against their backs. Their queen, Sarthavan, sat upon a throne carved from a single massive crystal. And she had ruled this empire for over 300 years. She was ancient by any standard, wise and cunning. And she had rejected 17 previous human trade delegations. Jinho was number 18. Human, the queen spoke. And her voice was a strange mixture of clicks and harmonics that the translator device in his ear converted to words. You come before us seeking trade agreements, as your kind always does. Yes, Your Majesty, Jinho replied, keeping his voice steady even though his heart was pounding. Humanity wishes to establish mining rights in the outer asteroid fields of your territory. And in exchange we know what you offer, the queen interrupted. waving one of her 4 arms in a dismissive gesture. Technology, medical supplies, cultural exchange programs. The same things every human delegation brings. Jinho swallowed hard and decided to try something different before leaving Earth. He had spent every available hour studying Volanti culture, reading everything he could find about their customs and traditions. One detail had stood out to him. The Volanti valued gifts, especially sweet substances, which were rare on their mineral-rich but biologically sparse worlds. He had brought something special, something he hoped would show respect for their culture. "Your Majesty," he said, reaching into his diplomatic pouch. "Before we discuss terms, I wish to offer a gift from my world to yours." The courtiers stirred with interest, their wings rustling like dry leaves in wind. The queen leaned forward slightly, her compound eyes reflecting Jinho's image 100 times over. He pulled out a small jar filled with golden liquid that caught the light and seemed to glow from within. "This is honey," he explained. "It is made by small creatures on our world called bees, and it is one of the sweetest substances our planet produces." He stepped forward and knelt, holding the jar up toward the throne as he had seen done in old videos of diplomatic ceremonies. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then Jinho noticed that the entire throne room had gone completely silent, not the polite silence of attention, but the heavy silence of shock. He looked up and saw that every Volanti in the room had frozen in place, their eyes fixed on him and the jar of honey in his hands. Even the queen had gone still, her mandibles hanging slightly open, and what he assumed was surprise. Ambassador Quan's voice crackled urgently in his earpiece. "Jinho, what did you just do? Why is everyone—" Her voice cut off as the queen suddenly made a sound. It started as a clicking noise deep in her throat, then grew into something that resonated through the crystalline walls of the chamber. She was laughing. The queen of the Volanti, ruler of 17 star systems, commander of a fleet that could destroy Earth in a matter of days, was laughing at him. Jinho felt his face grow hot with embarrassment, though he did not understand what he had done wrong. "Your Majesty," he began, "I apologize if I have caused offense." "Offense?" the queen repeated, her laughter fading but amusement still clear in her voice. "No, little human, you have not caused offense." She rose from her throne and descended the steps toward him, her movements graceful despite her size and age. Jinho remained kneeling, unsure what else to do. The queen stopped before him and looked down at the jar of honey in his hands. "Tell me, human," she said, "do you know what it means among my people when someone offers concentrated sweetness to a queen?" Jinho searched his memory desperately, but found nothing. "I'm sorry, Your Majesty. I do not." The queen's mandibles clicked again in that laughing sound. "That means marriage. You know." The words hit Jinho like a physical blow. Marriage. He had just proposed marriage to an alien queen. What? I did not," he stammered, his diplomatic training completely failing him behind him. He could hear the courtiers beginning to whisper among themselves, a rising tide of clicks and hums that filled the chamber in his earpiece. Ambassador Quan was saying something, but his mind could not process her words over the roaring panic in his head. "It is an ancient tradition," the queen continued, seemingly enjoying his distress, "from the old times when rival queens would merge their hives through such offerings. A gift of sweetness was a proposal of union, a binding of 2 powers into one." "Your Majesty, I swear I did not know," Jinho managed to say. "I meant only to show respect for your culture. I never intended." "Intentions matter little in matters of tradition," the queen said, but her voice was not angry, only curious. "The gesture has been made. The offer has been given, and now it must be answered." She turned to her guards and spoke a command in her native language, too fast for the translator to catch immediately. The massive crystal doors at the entrance of the throne room began to close. Jinho watched, in horror as his only exit sealed shut with a sound like thunder. No one leaves this chamber until the matter is resolved, the Queen announced to the assembled court. The human has made a proposal of union, whether he knew it or not, and such things cannot be ignored. Jinho finally found the strength to stand, though his legs felt weak beneath him. What happens now? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The Queen looked at him with an expression he could not read, something between amusement and genuine interest. Now, little human, she said, we discuss your future, and whether you will leave this world as a diplomat, a consort, or not at all. Ambassador Quan's voice finally broke through his shock, and her words sent ice through his veins. Jinho, I have just received confirmation from our cultural database. Refusing a marriage proposal from a Volante queen is considered a declaration of war under their law. He stood alone in that vast crystalline chamber, surrounded by aliens who watched him with unreadable eyes, and realized that his simple gift of honey might have just changed the fate of two civilizations. The Queen returned to her throne and settled onto it like a predator waiting for prey to make its next move. Take your time, human, she said. We have waited 300 years for something interesting to happen in this court. We can wait a little longer, and despite everything, despite the fear and the confusion and the weight of impossible choices pressing down on him, Jinho noticed something strange in the Queen's voice. She did not sound angry or offended. She sounded almost hopeful.